We are in the middle of a media-induced, politically perpetuated, and statistically ignorant hysteria that has affected a world that has entirely lost its perspective, forgotten all of its human history, and has absolutely no sense of purpose, duty, meaning, or destiny. And it's no wonder. We are reaping the results of a generation that has grown up with parents who choose popularity over principle, side with emotions rather than convictions, and who lack the ability to critically think about anything because they have absolutely no deeply held values, principles, or convictions to reason from. We are living in a pathetic world of overdramatic, overgrown toddlers who wore helmets on their tricycles, never climbed a tree, got trophies for everything, and act like crazed lemmings being herded along by virtue signals. We are living in a world where the highest value is to have no values at all. The highest moral is to have no opinions about anything. The highest personal achievement is to be yourself. And the most important thing in life is to be safe. This is absolute wholesale stupidity. We are drowning in a sea of entertainment and have forgotten how to think for ourselves. Our kids are being taught indulgence instead of restraint, safety instead of duty, and indifference instead of responsibility. We have traded truth and beauty for comfort and happiness, just as Huxley predicted in his 1932 book, A Brave New World. This entire generation has grown up never seeing tragedy, experiencing hardship, and can't bear the thought of a 95-year-old grandmother dying. Death has become taboo in our culture. Faithless funerals are painful reminders of the extraordinary measures people take to dress up and hide it. People refuse to come to terms with their own inevitable death and liken virus underreactors like myself to Hitler sending 6 million Jews to the gas chambers. This utter lack of perspective is shameful. We are a nation that lives on credit. Everything the Federal Reserve has done in the last 20 years has encouraged people to save less and spend more. And now, when the country needs its savings, it's printing more and more debt out of thin air. 300 million Americans, half of which are working, are taking on enough debt to pay $1,000 to every human being on the face of the planet just because of a new flu. People who have saved and planned for the future are seeing their wealth confiscated by low interest rates and inescapable inflation, while a generation of ignorant children who have never balanced a checkbook, spent every dime they ever made, and never risked anything will soon target their envy at anyone who owns anything, all because they were afraid to get sick, and can't comprehend the thought that some life-saving measures are actually too expensive. The irresponsibility of spending like this is astonishing, and the inability for people to comprehend it is bewildering. Every single year, the flu is a pandemic. But this is an election year. The liberal media is literally willing a disaster upon us in order to blame the president. Far from a real crisis, this will go down in history as the gigantic atomic wedgie that the American people gave themselves and then turned and gave the rest of the world. People are walking around with face shields, plastic gloves, and sanitizing their mail. We are being ruled by executive orders that change by the day. There are lines to get in grocery stores, prisoners are being let out of prison, and an entire new social strata is being formed based on who can act the most hysterical to save humanity. We are now training up a new generation of obsessive compulsive hand washers that are claiming to be heroes for wearing masks outside, all because of a new strain of the flu that has yet to catch up with the deaths the normal flu has caused this winter alone. And what happens next winter when a new strand of this same thing survives our colossal efforts? Are we really going to send the entire world economy into a tailspin every season? Who among us would bankrupt our families and ruin their future in order to try to extend our life 6 to 12 months? People are being spoon-fed data that is entirely dependent on the availability of test kits and voluntary participation. It's bad enough that my wife, who's a nurse, has to deal with every hypochondriac within a 50-mile radius. Now we are minting new ones every day. All winter, people with flu-like symptoms have been testing negative for AB flu. People like my sister have been coming back from Europe with symptoms. Isn't it possible that after a few painkillers, a good nap, a lot of us are immune and can move on with our lives? What about the common cold? Are we going to move heaven and earth to try to prevent that? Are we really that stupid? Do we really think that the media, which depend on sensational bad weather, horrifying disasters, have our best interests in mind? Do you really think that politicians who rely on your dependency are actively brawling over your vote, are barricading themselves behind printed money and protecting government jobs with executive orders, really care about your job, your business, your investments, your career, or your future? Do you really think that the World Health Organization that is fighting for significance can even comprehend the devastation a full stop in the world economy would cause? Are they concerned about the stress-related deaths? What about starvation, increased addictions, domestic violence, or all of the people facing death in isolation? I keep hearing, we just don't know enough. Really? What did I miss? Are there bombs being dropped on us? Are there mass graves being dug? We'll never know everything, but believe me, we know enough. And enough is enough. That is, if you can still tell the difference between a scratch and a compound fracture. I am actually embarrassed as an American. I'm embarrassed of our Western culture when I think about the generations that have gone before us, that have faced real struggles, real terror, real hardship, real adventure, and lived real lives. What qualifies as adventure today cannot even begin to compare to those brave souls that charted courses over unknown land and seas, who braved the unknown and met horrendous death in the struggle to discover new places and to defend ideas that were worth giving their lives for. And what of those brave souls that risked their lives and their fortunes for the freedoms that we now all disdain and toss aside under executive order after executive order, all because of an unrealized and irrational fear of a slightly more serious case of the flu? Are we really surprised that old people die? Are we surprised that people with compromised health conditions are at risk? What has changed? When I was 34, my wife died of cancer. Our boys were 9, 11, and 13. If you're old, you should be thankful. Dying old is a triumph, not a tragedy. If you have compromised health, you should be taking inventory and counting your blessings. Nobody's getting out of here alive. Death is what brings clarity to life. I don't want comfort. I don't want safety. I want God. I want poetry. I want meaning. I want to live in a world of real danger. I want to live in a world of real adventure. I want to live in a world of high achievement and the possibility of devastating failure to spur me along. I want to live, and that means sure, inevitable death. And I'm okay with that. And you should be too, because that is exactly what's going to happen. Get used to it and get a hold of yourself.